Hello, everyone. I am Michael Steelman, Director of Alumni Career Management and Professional Networks at William & Mary, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar, How to Land a Job You Love. Today's webinar is part of a new William & Mary webinar series and is made possible by the support of the William & Mary Alumni Association as we seek to provide relevant programming for our lifelong commitment to our alumni. We welcome any feedback and ideas to make this a valuable resource for you. Today's presentation is being recorded, and I will notify registrants once the recording is available. You may also access it at any time in the future with other webinars at www.wmalumni.com/webinars. It's important to note a few housekeeping items before we welcome our guest presenter. If you are experiencing any audio or video difficulties, please contact the Adobe Connect technical support number at 1-800-422-3623. Also, questions are welcome, and our presenter will answer as many questions as time will allow. You can submit your questions by typing in the box just below the presentation screen, and throughout the webinar, I will monitor the questions and share them with our presenter at the end of her presentation. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our guest presenter today. Erin Ewart is a talent strategy consultant and career coach. She has over 15 years of experience leading searches and helping organizations develop and improve their recruitment strategies and an insider's perspective on what recruiters and hiring managers are looking for. She uses this knowledge to help professionals navigate the job search process with a focus on tangible, action-oriented coaching and feedback on everything from the elevator pitch to resumes and interview skills. She has previously worked for a diverse set of organizations, including Google, the U.S. State Department, and KIPP, the nation's largest charter school network, and understands the nuances and challenges of the public, private, and social sectors. Erin now lives in Seattle and received her bachelor's degree from William & Mary and her MBA from Columbia Business School. We are truly delighted to have Erin join us this morning to share her advice with the William & Mary tribe. Thank you so much, Erin.
Thank you, Michael, and good morning, everyone. Anyone who's out here on the West Coast like me, good afternoon to everyone else. Excited to join you this morning and talk through how to land a job you love. And before we jump in and get started with the content, I just wanted to do a quick poll to warm us up and find out a little bit more about what you all want to talk about today. So if you can take a minute and just respond to the poll on the screen and select what is the top challenge or question you have related to the job search. We'll give you just a couple seconds to do that. Looks like the results are coming in. You can see them live on your screen. A lot of folks saying deciding what you want to do. All right. Looking like almost half of you saying deciding what you want to do is a big priority, and then spread across the rest of these with finding jobs you're interested in coming in second. So great, thank you for taking a minute to respond to that. Thank you, Michael. So we are definitely going to talk about both of those topics, all of those topics actually today. And just to give a little bit of framing again before we jump in, why are we here and what are we going to talk about? We're here because searching for a new job is hard. And if you've been doing it for a while, I'm sure that resonates with you. If you're just getting started, this isn't meant to be depressing, but it's hard work. It takes a lot of work. It can certainly be confusing, discouraging, but it doesn't have to be. And so what I want to focus on today is the idea that by taking a more proactive approach to your job search and bringing some structure to it, not only can you have some more control over the process, but you can also find opportunities that are going to be a great match for you and a great fit for your interests and your skills. So versus waiting for opportunities or seeing what's out there, what we're going to talk about is creating a strategy and a plan to go and find job opportunities in a way that allows you to be proactive and find things that are going to be the best match for you. So key points that we're going to touch on today. One is that relationships are a critical factor in your job search. Two, as I said, you do have more control than you think over the process. And I think we often feel like we're at the mercy of companies and organizations to get hired. And to some extent that's true, but there's a lot that you can do to drive and control the job search process. And then third, this is a journey, and so you don't know exactly when that right opportunity is going to come along. So we'll talk about the idea of being persistent, patient, and then having a plan that you can work and come back to in order to find those right opportunities. In terms of our agenda, we are going to focus on 3 components of an effective job search today. So 1 being your story, how you talk about yourself. 2 being your network and how you take advantage of other people that you know to help you find opportunities. And 3rd being a plan, as I mentioned, really having some structure and a plan for your search. And then as Michael mentioned, we'll have some time at the end of our session today for questions. So feel free, if you do have questions as we go along, to be typing them into the Q&A, and then Michael will moderate those at the end of our session. So don't feel like you have to wait till the end. If you do have a burning question, feel free to put that in, and we'll get to it at the end of our session. We're going to jump right into the first piece of our agenda today, which is talking about your story. And I have here connecting the dots, and I'll talk a little bit more about why I say that. But to frame it a little bit, the job search really is all about storytelling. And I think a lot of things that the clients I work with struggle with is how to talk about yourself, because it's really, really hard. I think we can all give each other great feedback and objective feedback, but it's very, very hard to be objective about yourself and about your own strengths and your own accomplishments. So the storytelling piece is important. It's also challenging. And you tell your story across a lot of different platforms. So as you can see here on the screen, in person, through networking meetings, through your elevator pitch, through interviews, through your tools on paper, such as your resume, and then finally online. So LinkedIn, of course, is a huge tool for the job search. You may have your own website, depending on the field that you're in. And then when I say online footprint there, that just means everything that might come up about you in the online world when an employer might look you up or Google you, which certainly happens. So the goal is to make sure that you're telling a consistent story across all those platforms about who you are, what you're good at, and what types of things you want to do in your career. And one thing I like to talk about too is that most of our career paths probably haven't been linear. And I think that's especially true for those of us who are grads from places like William and Mary with a liberal arts education. We didn't necessarily come out with, one clear job or career path that we were going to follow for the rest of our lives. And I think that's true of many people, of most people probably. We're interested in a lot of things, and we could potentially be good at a lot of things. But when you're talking about the job search, employers really want to know that you are going to solve their specific problem and meet their needs. And so there's a need to, connect the dots, as I said earlier, between all of your previous experiences, even if on paper they might look like they don't necessarily, all go in a linear fashion, to help employers understand what experience and skills do you have that's going to meet their needs. And so we're going to talk about how to do that here. But I just want to acknowledge, I think most of us have a varied experience. We've learned a lot of things in a lot of different contexts, and that's great. It's just how do you talk about that, and how do you frame that in a way that's going to highlight the important things for the people that you're talking to. So I like to use my story as an example. Michael shared a little bit about me, but I'll tell you a little more here. So as you know, I started off at William and Mary as a history major, went into admissions for a small art college, and then into HR and recruiting in my early career. Took a quick detour to work for the State Department, where I realized government was not the right place for me. Came back to recruiting for a nonprofit. The next time, went to Columbia Business School, where I interned at Google, and then back to the nonprofit world, where I worked on recruitment strategy for a national nonprofit, and now have my own business. So looking at that, you might say, gosh, how does that all come together? And so one of the activities I like to recommend for people is really doing some thinking around what are the through lines, or what are the commonalities in all of the experiences you've had. Thinking back on what are the times that you've felt most energized, most excited about your work? What are the skills that you've built through all of your experiences, even if they don't necessarily all relate to each other? And so for me, you'll see some of mine there are, this focus on talent and people, a focus on coaching and facilitation, creating tools and systems, and then this idea of cross-sector experience, which is actually very, very helpful in my current work because I work with clients from across the board, all different industries, all different career stages. So, I've been able to take all the knowledge and experiences that I've gained over the course of my career to date, and I'm using them all in different ways. But It's about how you talk about them. So, think about that for yourself. One of the initial exercises I recommend people do is really reflecting back on your work experience and, the things that are common between all the different experiences that you've had, and highlighting those things as a starting point. So the other piece of this is that your story is grounded in your strengths. We all have unique strengths and talents, things that we're great at. And it's often hard for us to identify what those are because we're so good at them naturally. We kind of take them for granted. We may think like, gosh, everybody can do this, but that's not true. So there are things that you are great at that other people are not. And it's important for you to be able to identify what those are and articulate them in the job search. So this is really the foundation, because if you don't know what you're good at, you're not going to be able to find opportunities that allow you to focus on those things. So you really, your goal is really to find jobs and organizations that will allow you to capitalize on your strengths, to spend the majority of your time doing things that you're naturally good at, and minimize, some of the things that maybe you're not as good at and don't enjoy. Not to say that you're never going to have things that you don't like to do in your job. We all have those, but you want to maximize, again, the focus on your strengths. So a couple of ways that you can do that. One is, as I said a little bit earlier, to really think through your previous accomplishments. So take some time to reflect on, from your past couple of jobs, especially, what were the times where you felt most energized? What are you most proud of? And what were you doing during those occasions? And you can think about non-work experiences too. So for me, I like to think about a time when I took some time off and traveled, and that was a very impactful experience in my life. And what were things, skills that I was building or using during that time. So there may be, volunteer or other extracurricular activities that you're involved in that are meaningful to you and important to you. So it's important to think about those too. Thinking about your proudest moments, what do those have in common? What were you doing during those times? Two, asking your friends, family, and colleagues. So they will often have a very quick read on you and what you're good at in a way that might surprise you. So again, we're able to be objective about each other, just not so much about ourselves. So try asking them for feedback, especially people that you've worked closely with over the years. And then the third thing I always recommend is to take assessments. The one I always recommend is StrengthsFinder, which is through the Gallup organization. They've done a lot of surveying and data to understand what are common strengths that people share. And so they have an online assessment you can take. It's very inexpensive. I think it's $15 online, but it'll give you your top 5 strengths. And it gives you some good insight and good vocabulary to use in talking about yourself. There are lots of other assessments out there. So certainly if you do work with a career coach or just want to take some, there's free assessments online. So there's lots of options out there, but I do recommend trying 1 or 2 just to give you a unique viewpoint on what some of those strengths are for you. And then the last part of your story is thinking about what's next for you. So you've identified what you're good at, but what do you want to do with that? And part of that is a process that we'll talk about in terms of learning and identifying potential opportunities. But I do think it's important to do some reflection up front on what is most important to you. So, things like, what do you want to be doing in your role? How important is, growth potential to you and the responsibilities that you'll have day to day? What do you want out of your team and your manager? And then some of those logistical things, which are very important in our work in terms of your salary. Where do you want to work? Are you open to traveling? Do you want a flexible schedule? Those things do impact your satisfaction. And so thinking about what you want out of those and what's most important. So I encourage people to think about what are your must-haves, because you're not going to get everything you want necessarily, but think about your top priorities, your must-haves in the next job, and make sure that you're really clear on those. And then second, clarify what you'll be asking for in your conversations with others. So we're going to talk about networking in a few minutes, and it's important to think about what do you want out of those conversations. And at the beginning, it might just be, intel on what does that person do, what does their company do, what's happening in the industry, some recommendations on organizations or websites or associations that you should pursue, and then it might get more specific into actual connections and other people that you might want to meet, or client leads if you have a business. But starting to think about those things so that you can pull this together into a coherent story or elevator pitch, as you may often hear it referred to. So I'll just wrap this piece up to say, going back over the three components we just talked about, your career story, which is what I like to call the elevator pitch because I feel like it's more comprehensive and goes back to the storytelling theme. One is, again, who are you? So, what do you do now? What have you done? This idea of a career headline. So if you're familiar with LinkedIn, you have a kind of headline or tagline there. So think about what that would be for you. The second piece, again, is what do you do best? So what are those through lines in your career so far? What are those top strengths or skills that you really want to be known for? And then the third piece is what are you looking for now? So whether that's the types of roles or industries or networking contacts you're targeting, just being able to articulate what it is that you're looking for, that you need. So getting clear on these three pieces and practicing putting this together into a very short, 30-second or so narrative is an important foundation for going out and doing some networking, which is what we're going to talk about next. So I'm going to give a few pieces of homework as we go through our presentation today. We don't have time to do all the activities that I would normally do as part of this presentation, but what I would normally have you do at this point is to actually draft this and then practice it. And so I strongly encourage you after this webinar to put your career story together if you haven't already done that, or maybe to revisit it if you do have a version of this, and actually practice it. So, find somebody in your home or a friend or a colleague who will give you some feedback, because I think getting comfortable with this and talking about yourself, again, is an important foundation for everything that comes next in your job search. With that, we're going to move on to some of the tactics of actually finding opportunities, because I know that is a big question that I get from many of my clients. How do I find these hidden opportunities? We hear a lot about the hidden job market. Where are all these jobs that you may not see in job postings? And the key to that, as you may have heard before, is your network and really being intentional about finding people who can lead you to those opportunities. So before we dive into this piece, we have another poll, actually two poll questions for you, because networking can be kind of a tricky topic. So I would love to hear what words come to mind when you think of networking, just off the top of your head. What are the first things you think of? And then what do you find most challenging or confusing about the networking process? So take a couple, maybe a minute or so. We won't spend too long here, but type in some answers and I'll share back some of what we're seeing here. All right, so let's see some of the responses on words for networking. Oh, sleazy. Yep, I see that one a lot. Schmoozing, socializing, connections, mentoring. That's great. Information gathering. Okay, so we've got some positive and negative associations there. Talking to others about their jobs. Arduous. Yes, it can certainly be arduous. And then in terms of what's most challenging, some of the responses I'm seeing being genuine, certainly. Just going down the list here. How to talk about yourself, certainly we heard that. Finding people that actually have leads. How to capture someone's attention. Taking initiative. Great. So just a sample of some of the responses. But I think those are all really valid and questions that, I hear a lot. This process is not black and white. There are some things about the job search that are more black and white. What makes a good resume, or, how do you perform well in an interview? Those are things that are a little bit more tangible, and there are kind of right and wrong answers. I think when it comes to networking, there are certainly best practices and recommendations that we're going to go through, but it is a little more gray in terms of how you approach it, and I think that can lead to some of these questions and confusion that people often have. So thank you for sharing those responses, and let's dive in and talk a little bit more about what this looks like and a process that you can go through to network effectively. And so to frame this, I just want to kind of talk about the different types of job search approach. So again, we talk about the passive search, and so that would be, searching job boards, looking at job postings, applying online, and waiting to hear back. And I think from some of those comments we just saw, a lot of you may have tried that, either recently or in the past, and realized that that is a really tough way to find a job. It can feel really rewarding because you can track, hey, I applied to 10 jobs today or 50 jobs this week. But at the end of the day, the results and the return rate from that are generally really low. It certainly can yield a job, and sometimes it does, but the probability that it will is fairly low, and there's a lot of work that you do for little yield. And so I like to talk with people then about combining some of those passive strategies with more active strategies. So that might look like actually, thinking very strategically about your network and researching target companies. So going out and thinking about what are the places where I'd want to work, not just who has a job right now, but where do I want to work, regardless of whether they might have an opening at this exact moment. Conducting those informational interviews, so going out and talking to people about what they do, what their organization does, and then again, asking for additional connections to continue to expand your network. And so we're going to dive into this a little bit more. In terms of why your network is such a critical tool, we've talked about some of this already. The idea of this hidden job market, there's a statistic out there that 80% of jobs are never posted. Does sound like a lot to me, but I also believe it. So even if a job is posted, by the time it's posted, there's often an internal candidate, or there may be, somebody who's already been identified for that job. So by the time a job is posted, it's often, not always, but often, kind of late in the process to be applying for it. So the goal of this approach is to really get on a company's or an organization's radar before that job is even posted, so that you are, one of the first people that they identify and maybe even proactively contact about that job versus waiting until it's posted and then applying along with hundreds of other people. So as you can see there, the second point, the average job posting receives 250 applications. Many receive many, many more than that. And so, in my background as a recruiter, sifting through all of those applications and trying to find people and qualified people is a huge task. And that's why, 75% of resumes are automatically screened out, why, that 6-second status true, and people don't spend much time on your resume. And also why, at the bottom there, candidates who are referred are 5 times more likely to be hired. And that is because, from a recruiting perspective, whether it's right or wrong, it's a lot easier to, proceed with candidates who come as referrals, who already have kind of a stamp of approval or trust from somebody within the organization, versus sorting through those hundreds of resumes and trying to find people that way. So your goal in this process is to be one of those referred candidates, to be in the kind of inner circle, or come through the side doors, I like to say it, into an organization versus waiting in line with all the hundreds of other people who have applied for that job. So I like to talk about some networking principles before we dive into the tactics. One is that, again, it should be the main focus of your job search. So I talk about the 80-20 rule. We just heard that 80% of jobs may never be posted. There's also a stat that 80% of people find their jobs through networking, which is essentially the same thing. But this 80-20 idea that 80% of your time should really be focused on networking and networking activities, because again, that's what's going to yield the best results. The other 20% can certainly be focused on some of those more passive strategies. So, checking job boards, applying to job postings, but combining those things. So once you've applied to a job, actually then networking with the company and trying to find somebody who can be your advocate and refer your application. So focusing on networking as your main strategy. Number 2, it's a game of give and take. So I think something that people often feel uncomfortable with when it comes to networking is that you're constantly asking other people for things, and that can feel awkward. We're programmed to be reciprocal. We want to have some back and forth and some give and take. And I think that you can give and take in the networking process. So, you are going to be asking people for time and information and to help you, but there's also opportunities for you to help them. And so I think always being, actively listening for opportunities to help the other people that you're networking with, whether that's connecting them with people in your network, or offering to give them feedback on something that they're working on, or just putting the offer out there and saying, what can I help you with? And letting that, be on the table. And sometimes it might be years later. So, the other thing about networking is that it's kind of a long game, you're building relationships for the long term, not just for the short term. And so somebody might help you out today, and then a few years later, they may be looking for a job and come back to you. So just remember that the give and take here takes place over a long time horizon. It doesn't have to take place in the moment. Number three, being strategic yet opportunistic. And what I mean by that is that we're going to talk about how to take a strategic approach to networking and identify people in the companies where you want to work. But there's also this opportunistic aspect of you never know where the right connection is going to come from. So the more people who know what you're looking for, the greater chances that one of them might help you in a way that you haven't anticipated. So I've had examples of clients finding job opportunities through people they talk to at jury duty, people they talk to in line waiting for lunch at a restaurant, friends of family members that they would have never thought would have had job leads for them. So just being open to that doesn't mean you have to, go out and talk to every single person you meet, but the more you can share with people what you're looking for, you may be pleasantly surprised by the leads or the connections that you get from places that you wouldn't have expected. And along with that, I think we think of our networks primarily as our professional networks, but your network is much broader than that. So if you think about, family and friends, if you think about, alumni networks, which we'll talk about, if you think about the other activities that you're involved in, if you have kids, the other parents from school, there are tons of networks that you're a part of. And so thinking beyond just your job related network is a way to broaden your access to different opportunities. The last couple of things, as I mentioned earlier, it does take time and patience and follow through. I think I hear from a lot of people, well, I emailed somebody and they just didn't get back to me. Well, yeah, that happens. That happens a lot, unfortunately. And so follow through and patience and persistence is a big part of this. So following up with people, realizing if one person in an organization doesn't get back to you, that you can find somebody else. So this is definitely an investment of time and energy for sure. I want to be clear about that. But again, it does yield the best results. And so just knowing that you're going to have to be persistent and follow through with people is an important piece of this process. And finally, it just does require putting yourself out there. So it can be hard to, be a little bit vulnerable and say, hey, I need some help or I need information, and position yourself in that way. But I think it does get easier the more that you do it. So, trying to start, networking with people that you do feel more comfortable with or people that especially if you're new to it, can help you get over that a little bit and help you start to feel a little more comfortable with it. With that, we'll move on to some of the more tactical pieces of this. So who should you network with? So I just mentioned that your network is broad. And so you can think about not only people you've worked with, which are clearly a great source of networking contacts, but other activities that you're involved in, alumni from undergrad, if you've been to grad school, even from high school and early in your life, and then of course friends and family. I like to recommend that people think about connectors. So we all know people who are just really well connected, and they're those people that are just constantly making those connections, making introductions to people. And so I'm sure that all of you know folks like that in your own life, and make sure that those people are really tuned into what you're looking for. So make sure that you're connecting with them on a regular basis, and they can really be influential for you. So when I moved out here to Seattle about 2.5 years ago, from the East Coast, I didn't know anyone, and I was trying to build my professional network. And I had one particular person who was a huge connector and introduced me to like 20 different people, which was very generous of her. It's just the way she is. But that just catapulted my networking here in a new city. So thinking about who those people are and making sure that you kind of start with them or connect with them early in your search is important. Again, thinking beyond your immediate connections. So there's actually a lot of research out there that says that your weaker ties are the most valuable in your job search. So not the people that know you very well, not the people that you connect with on a regular basis, because they already have probably shared with you the things that they know about. But it's the weaker ties, the second connections, if you think about LinkedIn, who are going to be potentially the most valuable or have information for you that you may not already have access to. So thinking about, those people who are in your second circle or outer circle, and how they might be the most helpful to you. And again, just reiterating to follow up on every lead, even if it doesn't immediately seem like it might be relevant, you never know. So it's worth your time to follow up on leads, especially early on in the process as you're exploring and looking at different opportunities. Again, your network is bigger than you think, and I just want to emphasize, since this is a William and Mary webinar, how important the William and Mary network is, and alumni networks in general. So LinkedIn has a great tool for this. It's relatively new, and if you haven't checked it out yet, it's pretty great. So if you go onto the William and Mary page there in LinkedIn, which is where I pulled this screenshot from, you can go to the Students and Alumni tab and see this great tool that helps you narrow down alumni that you may want to contact or network with. So as you'll see here, there's over 48,000 results. And then I can filter them down by where people live, where they work, what they do, and lots of other criteria. So this is just one example of, all these other William and Mary alums out there around the country and around the world who are likely willing to talk to you and to help you because we have that common connection. So really thinking about, there are tons of people out there who might be willing to connect with you. It's your job to find them. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. So how should you network? I think there's two, I kind of combine it into these two components. One is the online piece. So certainly LinkedIn is an important tool for that. Virtual networking. So William and Mary hosts online networking events. If you haven't checked one of those out, they're really great. I went to one a few months ago, and it was just a really neat way to do some networking in a virtual environment from my computer with people that I would have never had the opportunity to talk to otherwise. And then email introductions are a huge component of this. So getting introduced to other people over email and then taking the conversation offline. So again, one-on-one meetings are your real goal of this networking process. You want to have as many meetings with people as you can to forge those relationships and to gather information. So that's a goal. Events can be great chances to build your network. So thinking, professional networking events in your area, industry events, professional associations and groups are all great ways to broaden your network and meet people who you may not otherwise come in contact with. And then as we think about the networking process, there are really 3 key steps that we're going to go through in a little bit more detail. So one is research, and we'll talk about the different components of this. The second piece is actually reaching out and getting in touch. And the third piece is following up. And as I mentioned, that part is really, really critical to make sure that you're actually creating those relationships with people and especially following up with people who may not get back to you in a timely way. Let's dive into those a little bit more. So research, the first thing I recommend people do after they've developed their story and some of their goals is to create a target company list. And that should be 5 to 10 organizations that you're interested in. And again, don't worry yet about whether they have current openings that are a match. As we heard before, many jobs are never posted, and your goal is to identify those opportunities before they might even be posted. Some things to think about in creating this list, the factors there on the left, what are the industries you're interested in? How important is company size or growth stage to you? Are you open to relocating, or do you want to stay in your current geographic area? And then it's last on the list here, but I think actually probably should be first, what do you value in terms of the culture and mission of an organization? What's important to you on that front? So different things to think about. And then places to look, industry websites and publications, company lists. There's lots of local and national best places to work, or fastest growing companies. So those can be great resources. LinkedIn, again, is a great resource for this. So where do people that you know and respect work? Where do people who have job titles similar to what you're looking for work? And doing some searching and some research there to brainstorm different companies or organizations. And then finally, don't discount thinking about, what are some products and services that you really love and feel passionate about? And, those may be great organizations to add to your list. So as a starting point, this list can be pretty diverse, in terms of different types of organizations, sizes of organizations, so that you can learn a little bit more about whether these would be good places for you and good fits for you. That's really the goal of the process at this point. But after you've set up that target list, the other thing I recommend is setting up some job alerts if you haven't already done that. So this would be going on to job search websites and just saving some searches, having them emailed to you on a regular basis. And some of the ones I recommend there, LinkedIn has great functionality for this. Indeed is a very comprehensive website, although sometimes too comprehensive. So you've got to be thoughtful about the filters that you use there to make it narrow enough. And then, of course, there's lots of industry-specific sites out there that you may want to look at for your specific industry. But the goal of this, again, at the beginning is less about applying to specific jobs, although if you see your dream job come through, of course, you should pursue it. But it's more about getting a sense of what's out there, what organizations are hiring, what are organizations that sound interesting to you so that you can add them to your list. And then finally, once you've got that list identified, identifying contacts who work at those organizations and getting introduced to them is your next step. So LinkedIn is the best tool for that. And you can go directly to a company page to find out how you're connected. So you may have first connections in an organization, and that's great. A lot of times you may not. And so then second degree connections would be your goal in finding people that you've got a common intermediary person with, and then asking that person to introduce you. So this is really the way that you can get that initial in to an organization, that initial connection, and then have those conversations to learn more. So again, the next step is to actually get in touch, to reach out. And I talk about warm versus cold introductions a lot. So you always want to go for that warm introduction, that mutual connection who can introduce you ideally over email and say, gosh, my friend is really interested in learning more about your company. I'll let them follow up from here, but I'm going to make this connection. And that really helps you come with trust, helps you come with that kind of stamp of approval again, and makes the other person more likely to respond. So there's an example here, and these slides will be available after the webinar if you're looking for how to do that over email, but really it's about trying to get that introduction and then take the ball from there and set up a meeting. Some do's and don'ts. We won't go through all of these. I think the biggest thing I would say on the do side is just to be really genuine. So someone made the comment earlier that how are you authentic in networking? And I think it's through just being genuinely curious. So what questions do you have about the organization? Don't make it about I want a job or I want to work here right away. Even if that is your ultimate goal, you're approaching those initial conversations from a learning mindset to really understand, is this going to be a good fit for me? Is this a place I would even want to work? What do you do here? What is the culture like? So bringing those genuine questions that you have to the conversation, and again, building that relationship with someone so that they can be your advocate if you decide that that's an organization you want to pursue. And I think, the don't side is the opposite of that. Don't ask for or expect a job right away. I think the biggest reason people don't respond sometimes to networking requests is because they feel pressure, like, oh, now I've got to help this person get a job, when they may feel like they don't have that power or that influence. So I think, at the very beginning, just really making it about asking questions of them, learning more about their experience versus setting any expectations that they're going to be able to get you a job. Ideally, if you make a good impression and form a good relationship, then they're going to want to do that without you necessarily having to ask. And again, always following up. I just want to emphasize this one more time because I just think people don't do it enough. Follow up immediately after those networking meetings. If you haven't heard back from somebody in a week or so, always follow up again with another email. We all get so many emails, and I'm guilty of it. I'm sure we've all missed an email or meant to respond to something and then haven't done it. So I personally appreciate when somebody follows up with me, if I may have missed their email. And there are going to be some people who just never get back to you, and that's the reality of this process. But following up, at least twice is always a good practice. And then, of course, connecting on LinkedIn and making sure that you note any follow-up steps that you have with that person after you've met with them. So we've talked a lot about networking, and the third piece of the puzzle here that I just want to wrap up with is your plan. So structure is your friend in the job search. I think one of the frustrating parts of the job search can be that it can feel overwhelming, and it can feel like there's so much work to do. How do you have some structure around that? And so I'm going to go through a few tips on that to wrap us up before we move to the Q&A. So just like any project you might take on at work or even outside of work, you do need a plan. And so the components of that we're going to run through here, one is, thinking about time and how much time you'll spend on your search and how you'll spend that time. Setting some goals and milestones so that you have a sense of what you're aiming for and how you're progressing in your search. Tracking your time and accomplishments. And then lastly, and potentially most importantly, identifying an accountability partner. I think keeping ourselves accountable is one of the hardest things overall, just in life, but especially in the job search when it's sometimes a very solitary process. It can be very hard to hold yourself accountable to the things that you say you want to do. So we'll dive into each of those for a minute or two. So planning your job search time, again, think about realistically how much time every week can you commit to your search. If you're working full time and trying to do a job search on the side, it's tough, and you've got to really think critically about when are you going to put in the time for that. And not neglecting some of the other things you need to do. So spending time with your family or exercising or whatever it is that keeps you happy and healthy. If you don't also make time for that, you will burn out and you're not going to be effective, in any of those areas. So just being thoughtful about how much time do you realistically have and when is that going to be. So a lot of people will work all day and then come home and try to do their job search activities in the evening when they're exhausted. And sometimes, that's the time you have to do it. But if you can think about when do you have more energy, is it some time on the weekend when you're refreshed and ready to go that you can actually spend more time on this. So we are all different when it comes to this in terms of when our energy is highest. But think about that and try to make some progress every day, even if it's I'm going to log into LinkedIn for 10 minutes a day and make some new connections, or I'm going to make 2 updates to my resume today. If you can make some of that incremental progress and then find some longer chunks of time throughout the week to do more of the time-consuming work, that will really help you along. And then finally, where are you going to do all this work? So some people are fine doing it at home. If you're conducting a job search full time, sometimes it can be really helpful to get out of the house and be around other people. But again, it's knowing yourself and where you're going to be most productive. And just to give a guideline on the first question around time, people often ask me, well, how much time do I need to spend on my job search? And obviously that varies depending on what you have going on, but I generally recommend 8 to 10 hours a week as kind of a minimum threshold for an active job search. So if you're working full time, obviously adding that on to whatever hours you're putting in at work, but keep that in mind as maybe a barometer or a guide. So setting goals for yourself, you've probably heard about SMART goals, just how to think about setting goals in a structured way. I encourage people to set both weekly goals and then 3-month milestones. So thinking about your job search in 90-day increments, and because that's a good time horizon to go through a job search and either come out with an offer potentially or find that maybe you need to readjust your strategy. But think about, where do I want to be in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months? And then what are the things or activities I'm going to do each week to try to get me there? There's some sample goals here. I won't go through all of these because I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. But things like, identifying 3 to 5 new contacts every week so that you're keeping your networking going. Making some of that commitment to being active on LinkedIn or to being active at networking events. So think about what these might be for you. And again, think about that 80-20 rule of 80% of your time on those more active strategies for your job search. Find tools and systems that work for you. So, there's a lot of information that you're managing throughout the job search, from contact information to when do I need to follow up with somebody, to, again, how to manage your own time. So you'll see some options there. A few of the ones that I recommend to people, one is time tracking. So, especially if you don't have a lot of time to spend on your